Hello, everyone. Good evening. Ross here at Teacher Toolkit. Costs of living, energy prices. If you're watching here in the UK, the mini budget. Times are tough financially for people personally and for our schools professionally. In times of financial challenge, many multi-academy trusts and schools are likely to cut areas of discretionary spending. A staff wellbeing budget is sometimes the first to be cut. But research suggests successful organizations do the complete opposite. Evidence demonstrates that you can reduce costs and improve your financial performance, your pupil outcomes, as well as your staff retention. This session this evening is pitched for school and college and multi-academy trust leaders. We've had a number of people sign up. I'm going to show you where people have signed up in a moment. And I'm going to introduce Mark Solomon's founder of Welbee, a great tool, a very affordable tool actually to help you more strategically manage your staff wellbeing culture. In this session, so I'm currently live streaming to people through my YouTube channel, on Twitter, and on LinkedIn. So if you are logged into one of those platforms, you can leave a comment and interact and post some questions on the screen. So I'll just leave a comment here and just show you how that will be displayed. So here is my hello message on the screen. There it is in the bottom corner. So log in to LinkedIn, Twitter, or YouTube and to let me know where you're watching from. So we've got a few people watching live. I'm going to put up some statistics and see how many people have signed up. One or two will be watching this recorded, I'm sure. And let me know. So let's just start off with where are most people watching from. So if I just get this map up here, ticket holders for this session that have expressed an interest, we've got a couple of people over in the Middle East. But if we just zoom in over to the UK and we zoom in, we've got a few attendees, one or two from Northern Ireland, but the vast majority here from England. So if that's you, this is exactly what we are hoping to share with you tonight and talk to you about some of these issues that we face in the current climate. We're going to talk about the evidence behind improving staff wellbeing, how staff wellbeing can be central to your people strategy, what's Welbee and why you use it. So I'll talk about my experiences with Welbee and where to start, and then what to focus on in terms of how you can align your school values with the Department for Education Staff Wellbeing Charter. So I am going to just take my screen off here, and I am going to introduce you, everyone, to Mark. So Mark, good evening.
Good evening. Thanks for having me, Ross, and welcome to everybody from, at least we can say globally, although you've said most people from England, but welcome to everyone for wherever you are. And I always feel a bit guilty talking about well-being at 7 o'clock at night.
Yes.
It should be off, but Ross has assured me it's when people can find
it's a
time.
good time for people to tune in. Mark, can I get you to just introduce yourself, your background, why you got interested in staff wellbeing, and let's add a third question: what is Welbee? So, who are you?
In order. So I've worked with schools for the last 10, 12 years. I did have a first career, actually, which was, you can all boo a little bit, retail banking. Didn't get any of the bonuses that anybody talks about these days, although, I was retail director for Sainsbury's Bank, but really fascinated in culture because I had people from 3 different organizations working with me nationally, and it always stuck with me. And I got into education by helping to set up a national charity that took Olympians into schools as part of the 2012 games. And then over the last few years since then, I've been really supporting thousands of school leaders, hundreds of schools, really around culture and leadership. And then in 2016, welcome to our guests in Northern Ireland, working with 17 schools around Belfast. The idea of Welbee kind of was born out of working with schools and seeing a survey there, and this realization that if we want to deliver the best outcomes for our students, there's only one real way to do it. And yet it is about whole school well-being, but actually the starting point is staff, because if they don't come into work, they don't have the resources, they don't feel good in themselves, they're not don't have the right support, then how can we expect them to deliver the outcomes for young people? So really, I've founded Welbee in 2018, and have worked tirelessly with schools and my team to really help them understand, I guess, how to put staff first and what the best approach is.
Okay, so we'll unpick what Welbee is, and we'll have a look at it in a moment. Could I start off with that, mate? The tricky question about staff well-being evidence, I suppose, in the current climate where we've got increasing costs for everybody. The recruitment crisis in England is getting worse. It's harder to retain teachers. The numbers of applications are declining. What's the evidence suggest from your perspective in terms of improving people outcomes, improving staff retention budgets, or reducing what you spend on advertising, for example, and generally the data that you gather? So I know your software, which we'll look at later, gathers well-being data from across a large number of organizations, and that gives you a kind of macro overview of the issues. But give us the kind of evidence that you're aware of.
Yeah, so there's limited evidence in the schools, but much more evidence in business and the health sector, and I'll share some of that. And if anybody's interested, I've got it all written down, so I'm not going to give links now, but I'm very happy to share through Ross or directly with anybody kind of where this evidence comes from. Mm-hmm. And of course, it's quite natural in times of high stress, and particularly financial stress, that people kind of tend to protect what they've got and cut that discretionary spend. But I guess the first bit of evidence really I'm going to talk about is the impact it has on results. And the first major piece of evidence research in the education sector goes back to 2007 with Birkbeck College and Work Life Support, around 800 schools overall, and both in the primary and the secondary sectors. And they found a statistically significant link between staff self-reported well-being and improvements in SATs and GCSE scores, and also value-added improvement. The challenge they found, though, was could they really prove it was causal? So it's statistically significant, but actually the debate still came that maybe staff well-being was better because the performance of students was better, as opposed to performance of students got better because staff well-being was better. So there was still some doubt around that, but they were very excited, were the researchers, because they thought what they showed was it was actually easier to improve some performance of these young people through improving well-being than it was in many of the strategies that schools deployed. Last year, though, in 2021, the School Development Trust did an overview of over 30 papers, really pulling together the researchers out there, and came up and said actually they tentatively believe that they could prove a causal effect between the impact of the quality of teachers' working conditions and well-being, and that it had a clear and consistent relationship with student attainment. And I think for all of those of us that work in education, just intuitively, it is kind of obvious that if people go to work feeling well, if they enjoy what they do, if they feel supported, it's highly likely that what they deliver is going to be better, and as a result, the people they're delivering it to are obviously going to get a better outcome and result. The evidence I often like, and a lot of it comes from the King's Fund, is around the health service, though, where there has been much more research into staff self-reported wellbeing and the impact it has, and a wide number of studies have shown its link with multiple outcomes. So those outcomes cover staff absenteeism. So I guess people have lower absences, significant reductions in turnover, reductions in staff cover spend. So when we could get, I guess in the education, when it was easy to get cover, we wouldn't need it as much. In patient satisfaction, in patient infections and mortality rates. So we could actually put a direct link between staff self-reported well-being and the mortality of patients. So I guess next time you look at booking a hospital, don't just look at the consultant, but maybe look at the staff wellbeing scores, because it could have a material outcome on how you get through whatever it is you
some of the things you've mentioned, Mark. So just for people watching, we're streaming live on Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You can post comments and pose them to myself or Mark. We're going to have a chat. We're going to show you some slides. We're going to show you a bit of software along the way. Mark, I was familiar with that piece of research that you first quoted, published 2007 or something like that.
Yeah, 2007, yeah.
And for me, getting interested in wellbeing, it was one of the first pieces of academic research that actually suggested, look, these happy skills can get happy outcomes in certain ways. And I guess the research is much more in abundance now. And I guess why we're here is to think, how can school leaders do it more strategically beyond that Google anonymous survey, which is where Welbee comes in, and we'll get to that point. I guess my question is, you've got this phrase, people strategy. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, just before I jump into that, I think that one other thing we ought to just say is we didn't talk about as associated costs, because that's one of the things we're talking about. Because it's, as I said, it's natural here for people to think about spending money or not spending money, but it hasn't been that much up to date. But if we look back at some government's own statistics and information from ASCL back from 2016-17, it was easy to predict that schools, from a small school around 20,000 to bigger schools way over £100,000, and in some cases £300,000-400,000 of cost was being wasted on things like recruitment,
I remember spending £100,000 one academic year on cover alone.
So clearly there are some direct cash benefits from getting this right in terms of immediate reduction. And so the natural thing is and it's the same in business in many ways. When you look at businesses, when there's recession, people stop spending on marketing and they stop spending on training. But actually, the smart leaders do exactly the opposite, because that's the best way to get the market share and get their message out there. And in some ways, for schools, it's kind of the same. This is the time when staff need the most support, and you need the best retention, and it's a time to really stand out. So in many ways, the smart leaders do the opposite. This is a time to spend on this area and not just have become the employer of choice. But we are sadly in a competitive marketplace now. Although we all educators want to work together, ultimately, you're looking after your own match, your own school. You want to make sure that those people that work for you, and particularly the talented people, do not leave. So it's about what are the things you put in place, and people strategy and developing them is one way of doing that. And interesting, there was a Confederation of School Trusts report out just back in June, July. We're a recognised supplier of theirs, and that showed that 81% of the larger trusts, that's 20 schools plus, this was their number one priority for this coming year. And even 50% of smaller trusts, those below, and even the very small trusts, were saying it was their number one priority. So a lot of people were talking about it, but only about a quarter had something in place. And the rest was saying, well, this coming year, 23, was when they were going to really focus on this. I'll come back to this. Well, I'll just cover this slide in terms of staff wellbeing, and then we'll jump onto people strategy. Okay. The key thing in terms of putting staff wellbeing at the centre is to think about where you want to start, and we'll come on to that again at the end. But really, a lot of schools, when they're looking at staff wellbeing, or they're looking at being an employer of choice, are starting at what I call hygiene factors, really, which are the perks, the treats, and kind of activities, that wellbeing day, discount shopping, things I see all the time now, life cover, all the things that actually just become a hygiene factor. They also look to provide training, things on resilience, mindfulness. There's nothing wrong with any of these, but really putting staff wellbeing at the centre is really about your culture. So it's actually about, how do you create a culture where people really want to be there? And that's really about the behaviours, the system support, and how that ties into your values and your vision And by values, it's the behaviours that underpin them. So do your staff and students and people articulate what we see every day in order to deliver those values? And so that's what we mean by putting wellbeing at the centre. It's the culture. And what we mean by people strategy, and it'd be great while we're talking about this, if people can in comments or maybe opportunity to do a poll or something, just to say who out there has got a people strategy. But, people strategy is about having a plan. And that plan covers all these areas around the employee life cycle. So how do we attract, how do we recruit and onboard? How do we manage the performance so that people are performing well? How do we develop people? How do we then retain? And if people do leave, because it's inevitable, some people will, whether that's at hopefully the end of a long career when they're ready for proper retirement rather than early retirement or escaping, or perhaps they do go for promotion and you don't have those vacancies. Although as MATs, particularly those geographically well placed, this should be less of an option as if you manage that well across the map.
Can I interrupt this? Is this strategy yours, or is it inspired by a bit of research or some recommendations?
No, so employee life cycle, I'm going to add one bit to this, which is ours, but actually this 7 sequence of an employee life cycle and what makes up people strategy is well researched. Organizations, particularly in business, have been doing it for I'd probably say decades, and there are many schools that are doing this. Often people talk about attracting, recruiting and retaining, and they don't always talk about all the pieces that make up. But it is really about how you develop a plan to build a reputation where actually people hear about you, so they want to come to your school, you attract them. How does your recruitment process stand out differently? I mean, if you go to tests or even some digital ones or more local ones, and you look at different job adverts, you can often kind of move them around and it wouldn't make any difference really. It's a school, so I guess it's how do you demonstrate that you are that difference from others? How do you kind of onboard them? And I deliberately use the word onboarding. Often we still use induction in education, but onboarding is, induction sounds like a
onboarding is the business term. Mark, we're 18 minutes in, and I'm conscious we're talking about Welbee, which is a great resource, and we haven't really showed anybody. Let me
just finish this slide, then we'll move on to Welbee. So I'm just going to say, and often within this, when we look at development and retention, people talk about talent and succession, and obviously it's helping people to say, well, how do we develop the right people, and how do we know if we've got the right people to develop, and then how do we plan the replacements? Harder to do at a single school in a way, but as MATs become bigger and more professional, this should be something that's kind of sitting at the key. And the bit that we added to this, and I've called it well-being behaviours, is really the day-to-day activities, the behaviours of leaders. We refer to 12 competencies proven to prevent and reduce staff stress. Again, I can share information, but every day there are moments of truth where leaders mix with staff and things happen, where if you can get those right through the behaviours, it can make a massive difference to the daily well-being and the culture, and again, feed into all these bits. And just before I get into the Welbee, if anybody's interested in, the key thing, you might have seen the 9-grid box in terms of talent management and succession planning. But obviously, one way is to review and measure people's performance and put them into these boxes, so you know who your talent are, so you know who your people that need some support are. Very easy to do. One of the things, one of my partner companies has a tech solution for this, and that's from their platform. So if people are interested again in saying, well, how can we actually measure this? Because it's so hard, particularly across hundreds or thousands of people. There are ways of doing that. So let me just very quickly bring you onto Welbee then. So what Welbee's about really is helping do some of the things I've talked about, which is professionalizing and systemizing how you go about managing staff wellbeing. And the key point is that start. How do we know where we are now? So you can come to us. We've got a survey. It's just one of the starting points. But of course, there's lots of things happening in your MAT school, college setting that you can use without doing a survey to say, actually, let me understand about my well-being, your staff retention and turnover, your absences, whether you've got grievances, doing exit interviews, so when people leave, but of course also doing stay interviews, which is something, you know, I've mentioned with Ross before, about actually asking questions of staff, and particularly your talented staff, about what's going to keep them in your school, what do they like about it, what do you need to do more of, are all things that you can do to measure and keep people before you move on to kind of a more professional survey platform. But what we do is we provide a measurement, simple online platform. On the left, you can see our dashboard. Effectively, we use the Health and Safety Executives Indicator tool. So it's a recognized measure in the new Staff Wellbeing Charter. So you can have a consistent measurement each time you do it.
I'm going to looking at some comments coming in, and I want to ask the harder question, I suppose, is this. I've used Welbee. I know it's fantastic software, so people might be looking at this for the first time new, and a topic why we're here, cost of living and things like that. How would this data not only improve staff morale, but how would it help save me money as a school?
Yeah, so what we do, as well as measuring it and allowing you to track to give that starting point, we suggest and recommend action. So we help you pinpoint those areas that are likely to be needing the greatest support, and as a result, you can take action to improve culture, to support those staff that need it, clearly making them less likely to be absent from school, making them more likely to stay. You know, the bits you can see on them are going to kind of help you think about where those challenges are with your own map. And we also provide a toolkit, which again provides you with wellbeing foundations, but also some courses and training that you can share with leaders and give them an opportunity to understand those behaviours that if they deliver each day, and have some training around those that are effectively kind of help them. So the survey is an important part, and that measurement is an important part, and the tracking is really important, commitment 11 of the Staff Wellbeing Charter. But actually the most important thing is what happens afterwards. So we're heavily focused on how do we help you take action, as opposed to what often happens when you do it yourself with surveys, as well as having to take all that time to run it and spending obviously money on doing that, and then doing your own analysis. Often you run out of time or energy, or aren't quite sure where to focus for action. So really it's about us helping you identify where you really need to put your energy and effort, and clearly that reduces your workload. Also through filters and things like that, we can pinpoint staff groups, so you're not doing it to all teachers, for instance, or all support staff. You might just be able to focus on particular groups of teachers or particular staff, and so you can really hopefully lift up performance. But as I said, all our recommendations are really about culture. So you won't see us recommending yoga, even though there's nothing wrong with yoga. Obviously, once you've done the yoga, if you're not happy with your job, nothing changes. So everything we do is around leadership and culture.
So make a change to your policies, behaviour, curriculum, whatever it would be. You can track the changes inside. As long as your questions are the same between each survey, you can track the changes.
Yeah, so we use the Health and Safety Executive tool just for that, because it is evidence built. It's been independently evaluated. It's recognised in the Staff Wellbeing Charter. We know people like to use their own questions, so we have added the ability to add a few of your own. However, we lock down the 35 questions. You can't change those. That's the core of our survey. It's probably what differentiates us from most others, and sometimes we lose custom from it, because people do want to create their own surveys and change data sets. But I go, look, if you're going to track, you've got to use the same questions.
Yeah. So in essence, we get connected. You help the school get set up. We start the initial survey. We might target groups of staff or all staff, and then we start to gather the data.
Yeah, and then they get data. The other key thing that we've got in our platform as well is the ability to collect the staff comments and respond to them, so you can have two-way anonymous.
Go back to the slide that had all the different boxes and arrows. I think it was that one there. So no, next one. You went one too far. Mark's controlling the slides tonight, ladies and
All
gentlemen.
right, sorry, that one.
Yes, that one. So if we just kind of do a little kind of whistle-stop tour of what's on this screen for people. So what's in the top left? We've got the progress. So that's all the different topics. All these colours represent different...
Yeah, so they're the 7 management... Well, there's 6 management standards, but they're the 7 scores plus the additional question score. And that's because the management standard for support is split into manager support and peer support. So these are health and safety. They're not ours. The health and safety executive management standards. Those have done stress risk assessments, or those from the HR groups may well recognise these. Every employer of 5 or more staff is supposed to have management standards in place. You don't have to use the health and safety executive ones, but why wouldn't you?
Okay.
And for those that don't know the health and safety executive, they're usually the ones that people hear about with accidents, but you've probably heard more about them because they also managed all the COVID security of workplaces as well.
What are the big boxes on the screen, Mark? The ones to the right-hand side, the management standards, is it?
So which are we looking at? The red and greens?
The red and greens on the right-hand side.
Yeah, so that's heat maps. So that effectively is taking scores from different filters and showing you so if you look at the ones on the left, they're their overall scores for the school in those management standards. The ones on the right are heat maps that show specific groups of staff scores in the same areas. So you're breaking those overall scores down for the school or the MAT into individual ones, and those filters can be, you can create your own, so they're effectively, you can do your maths teams. We do protect anonymity, so you can only report if 5 or more in any particular group take part. So
people can respond to each other anonymous inside, is that?
Yeah, so people, leaders can respond to staff that have taken surveys and provided comments anonymously. And that's great if, you've probably all had that survey where somebody says communication is poor, and that's it. And so you can now go back and say, okay, thank you for sharing, but what about communication? But what ideas have you got? Or maybe you just want to thank people for taking part and giving you nice comments. And occasionally we obviously have those comments nobody wants, and maybe it's about bullying, harassment, or it's about diversity, inclusion, equity, and you want to perhaps respond and saying, look, that's not what we expect here. Here's the policies and procedures, but please break anonymity, come and see me. And even if they don't, you can at least follow up with them, which is something you can do.
So I guess, people watching live, again, comments in the chat box, please. We're streaming live to Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And we're going to circulate lots of links and codes for you, people that have signed up.
And Mark, I've got some QR codes at the end with some resources.
Okay, fantastic. I guess a critical question then from me tonight is the cost of living and energy prices, etc. Given that you have a large number of schools now using your software, and at a macro level, you can, I guess, map which schools are managing wellbeing really well. Can we dig a bit deeper? Do you have an idea of if schools that are managing wellbeing better than others have a healthier budget, for example?
Well, I think it is quite difficult because obviously so much goes into budget in terms of what a school gets in the first place, in terms of where it is, location, and various other bits. I think one of the things I can say in terms of a lot of our schools do well, and I think that's often inevitable, isn't it? You often find that the people that come and find you who are interested in this often are doing perhaps better. They understand the benefits of it. We've just started to track actually and look at working with some of our customers about can we track retention of various things, because it's in early days, because a lot of schools and places don't actually track it as well as they might. So it's not easy for us to get that information. So this is my perception and my opinion, but clearly we've seen the evidence, and I think clearly schools that lead well, that have a good culture where people want to be, staff do stay there longer. They don't want to leave, and usually they leave only because of promotion if there's no vacancies. So I think intuitively, and I guess most of the people watching, I hope, would agree that intuitively, if you create a culture where people want to be and can do their best work, then it's highly likely that things like minor absences and various other bits are likely to be less, because people are likely to be healthier, get less ill, face less stress, but also they want to go stay there. So, you're going to face the likelihood of less recruitment costs as well.
Could you take us through maybe a couple more slides, Mark? So everyone watching, we're halfway through. We're probably going to wrap things up earlier than scheduled, but we're just going to talk you through some kind of key things to help from Welbee, how you can use it to support your retention, raise results. And Mark's going to got a couple of QR codes and how you can get connected with them.
Yeah, and we can go back and look at the people strategy. I'll jump back to that as well, just to give a couple of ideas around what some of our, I suggest, or what some of our good customers are perhaps doing. I've kind of covered that. I'm not going to cover that, but those are some of our key benefits, and I will have an offer for you. As I said, we said to people we'd start with, we'd also say where to start in the Staff Wellbeing Charter. Well, I've already given a clue that really that starting point is around those leadership behaviours and culture. And if we look at the Staff Wellbeing Charter, so whether you've signed up to it or you're thinking about it, the purpose of signing up is to use it to support what you're doing, both in terms of publicly declaring it, but actually it can't be a tick box exercise. So you shouldn't do it so you can just tell people. You really do need to think about how you're going to use it and which areas to focus on. And again, in typical fashion, when we've got heavy workload schools, let's produce a charter with 11 commitments. And although it does have the DFE commitments and the Ofsted commitments, the biggest number or the highest number are clearly for schools. So I'm going to suggest the three that you might want to kind of look at are commitments.
And this is the leadership team that should focus on these.
Yeah, I think to start with, the first three, there's four you should look at, but the first three I think are 3 and 10 together, which is about looking after yourself, the leaders. Obviously, the oxygen mask in the plane is a well-used kind of simile, but it's true, isn't it, that you have to look after yourself. If you're not in fit, if you're burnt out in no fit state, how can you look after those? And that includes middle leaders. And so if we look at our wellbeing scores, particularly around demands, it is leaders, particularly middle leaders, but also senior leaders, that give the lowest scores of any. And yet we need them to be in the healthiest position, and it's a factor of our sector, isn't it? One of the few, having had 2 careers, 23 years in retail banking and now 12 in education. Now I can very much see the differences, and I've worked with a lot of other sectors as well before I kind of finished in education. And one of the biggest differences for leaders is the lack of capacity and lack of time they're given. I remember when I stepped out of being a cashier and kind of moving up as part of my training, how very quickly you didn't have to keep going back to do things. As you led up, more and more of your time, so 80-90% of your time was as a leader, and your job was to help develop and deliver the performance through others, not also to do your job. And clearly a lot of training programs in business in particular deliver graduate and other training more effectively because people are given time. They're not quite as timetabled. There is more capacity. So a lot of reasons why it is harder, and also why, as smart leaders, we need to think a little bit differently and say, well, how can we support?
But really, that use your platform and gather that data, I would suspect they are, number 11 on the screen, measuring staff wellbeing and working smarter, or are many on a journey still?
No, I think a lot of people are still on a journey. I think it's inevitable how hard it is, and the sheer workload that does go on, because even our high scoring schools, there is still workload. What they do is they do help staff understand that actually you can only do what you can do. Well, you can only do what you can do, and therefore it is about being smart. It is about working efficiently. It is about accepting you'll not get everything done. So when you get to the end of the day, you don't have to carry that over. You just pick it up in the morning. But you are quite right. Anybody using us is covered under number 11 automatically, because our measure is recognised in the Staff Wellbeing Charter, because it's the health and safety executives, not ours. So that would automatically kind of go, yeah, I'm meeting commitment in 11. The resources we provide in the toolkit are very much aimed at 3 and 10, which is how do we help people understand those behaviours that will lower stress in the school and in other staff, and what are some of the training like coaching and other bits that we deliver. The one I haven't highlighted that will be next will be number 2, which is about giving staff the support they need to take responsibility.
Just interject, Mark, just for clarity, just in case people watching live. So this is England's Department for Education's Staff Wellbeing Charter.
It is
published 2021, I think it was 2020.
Yeah, May 2021. That's so
pretty recent. You know, a few schools are getting to grips with this now. Obviously, challenging circumstances for everyone here in England.
And I do see it. I do see it recognised now on a number of MAT pages when they look at. They've often got a wellbeing link or a staff benefits link, and often they are now starting to mention the Staff Wellbeing Charter.
So, as I said, a link as in a person in charge of the strategy or a person driving a.
No, as in they've signed up to it.
Right, okay, they've got a link signed up. I mean, what I've seen in some schools now is they're starting to have a wellbeing committee. A member you recommended, not a member of SLT on the team, so it's a bit more of an honest, transparent process that feeds into leadership.
Yeah, I mean, my only take on that, it's fine not to have a member of the SLT as long as it has decision-making ability.
Of course,
and sometimes not having SLT, because they can be highly effective, but they can also become talking shops. So it's how do you make sure if you're going to do things. But you are right, people are appointing people as to lead.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing I've seen on my travels is a wellbeing budget that's protected, which has helps that committee take some actions. Mark, I'm conscious of time. You got another slide you want to put on?
No, let's just come back to this. I've got an offer for people and some resources, but let's just come back to
I just remind people watching live, leave your comments on the device that you're watching, the platform, and then they'll come on my side and I can put these on the screen for Mark to respond to. So, Mark, people strategy.
Yeah, so again, it's just getting people to think about this whole area, because if you think about, I'll start with recruitment, as I said, and I just want to give a couple of practical thoughts that are different. Some people love these, some people go, well, that'll never work. We can't do that. There's no time. But one of the things, as I said, is how do you stand out? How do you look different to all the other schools when people are kind of applying to you? And I guess one thing is to think about, what goes into your recruitment pack. What are you going to say that kind of is a bit different to someone else? So it can't just be about the perks and benefits, but why would they want to do? And there's one of my customers, for instance, has got genuinely asked staff who want to, and they've made a load of videos about what it's like to work in this school, in this trust, and they're kind of using those out there. But again, if you're going to recruit people, one of my pet hates, and I understand why it is, but from whatever sector it is, I always get frustrated when people say, from a application point of view, look, if we don't get back to you, there's no feedback.
That's not acceptable, is it?
Well, but everybody does it, and they say to me, the volumes.
Yeah, it's not good.
And I go, but you're missing a massive opportunity to stand out. And with technology these days,
why we're losing teaching numbers, but
and just one quick thought, and you might love it, you might hate it, and technology, but somebody's got to check the application form anyway. So I presume you don't just look at the name and put it down. You read what people have said. Therefore, if somebody's got to do that, just get them to note down one good thing they see, and get them to note out the main reason why it was put to one side, and then. If you make a note of those two things, and then anybody using a tool just as simple as Loom or anything can jump on there and make a 45 second, 60-second quick video to say hi,
quick email.
Thanks so much for applying. Lovely interest. Look, really love this about your application. This is why.
It sounds like a bit of hard work, but that ripple effect of giving someone
imagine it's quite quick. Imagine spending that and the impact on that school. I didn't get the job, but I feel like I did, and I'm going to tell everybody in my school about this wonderful. So it's thinking like that, and also when you appoint people, think about they join my school the day I've appointed them, not when they turn up first day. So how do I keep them interested? How do I get them into my culture? And on day one, it's not about a 1 week a day one induction or a week one. It's kind of year one, year two. What's that process?
Checking in, how do policies live out in practice?
And we can run that all the way through.
Mark, give us the QR code so people watching, they've been waiting a long time. You've got.
Yeah, I'll give you the QR code. I'll give you the QR codes first, and then.
Let's have a QR code, please. People watching live, scan the screens, please. Mark, tell us what each of the QR.
Yeah, so the first one I showed you a tech example of the 9-grid box. But actually, if for free, and if you don't want to pay for a tech example, it's much easier. On there, I've put together an example of a talent management succession planning process where you can literally use the questions and fill in your own box and take you through for a whole process of how you put people into grids, etc. The second one is for people who want to measure. Perhaps they don't want to pay, or they want to see. It's kind of everything you ever wanted to know about running a staff wellbeing survey.
One in the middle, one in the middle.
Why you should do it. And then the other one just looks at from attraction to retention, and so it's a kind of a partner to the DIY and 9-grid box, just looking at some of the things that are kind of there that you might do. So they're all kind of things that fit into a people strategy. They're not the complete picture, but I'm hoping they'll give people some real value. And
so there you go, loads of great resources. And do you have a special discount for people that are
so if people want to come and have a conversation, because hey, the first thing we've got to make sure is Welbee's a fit for you. So it is for a lot of schools, but maybe it isn't. You've got to be able to take action, not just talk about action. You've got to be able to get all the decision makers bought in. Often we find HR directors love us, but they can't always get it past the CFO or the CEO, etc. But we're always happy to talk, give a demo, but also give free advice as we do. So what we've done actually is, and it's difficult. You can go to our website welbee.co.uk 1L and look at pricing. It's all transparent. We don't hide. You can see the number of people. If you're a mat, you can get a bit extra off there, depending on the size of your mat. So don't think that's it, just there. And that's not because mats are necessarily special, although obviously you're all special. It's just because if we get a group of schools together, it doesn't cost us as much to market, and it doesn't cost us as much to bring on. So why shouldn't we pass on that saving for people? So when I've been working with the Confederation School Trust, for example, and others, everybody seems to be looking at the next 2 years as being the real problem. So what we thought, do you know what? Why don't we give people certainty of this year's premium and next? So it's a better way than saying it's half price, because it really is half price. But we're not going to make you pay the 2 years up front. We're going to let you pay half now, half next year. So effectively, you're getting 2 years premiums for one. And as it says, it includes 12 months report. You're never tied in with us because you don't, if you didn't like it, and I'm sure you would. And you actually, if you don't like it the first time, the full money back guarantee as well. We've had that since we started, because we believe we want people to love what we do. And if they don't, then they go. Now, nobody's ever claimed on it.
The key question I've got on here on my screen, I'm going to boot yours off and put mine on, is the actual price page on your website here. So good value, really affordable. I see a lot of ed tech products in my life as a teacher blogger, costing thousands and thousands in some cases for schools. And Mark and Welbee make things very affordable. And if you can get logged in and gather that data, then you can start to really tackle culture.
Yeah, the highest price for an individual school without this offer would be $11.97 with a premium. Obviously, you get that at half that price at the moment. You get that half each year. So I think we're doing our bit to help in the cost of living. But if you didn't get back what you invested with us in 12 months, then you're not implementing stuff and you're doing something wrong. Being
so
honest.
There's the offer, folks, on the screen. Quote Teacher Toolkit, email market support at Welbee, 1L, welbee.co.uk. I'm going to put all these in the links to people that have signed up if you're watching this recorded also. While we're on the screens, Mark, I've got the blog that I wrote on your site when I had a look at your software, and we called it "Not Stop Guessing in the Dark." You know, we do these surveys. We don't really religiously gather the data. So that's a blog on Teacher Toolkit that I've written that's ported over to Welbee also, where we can talk about how we evidence this. We've got a landing page there. Is that a separate landing page to this evening?
No,
Mark?
so that's if you want that. That's if just people want. You can self-select and just go and buy it. But I wouldn't do that at the moment, because if you did that, you wouldn't get my offer. So
let's
with your Teacher Toolkit
page, and then that slide there.
Yeah. If you do that by mistake, we'll sort you out. Don't worry. But obviously, we'd love to see you. My suggestion, though, is, because we want to make sure it is right for you, is come and have a demo in 30 minutes. We'll whiz you through the live platform. We'll take you through the things. We'll talk to you about what are you doing in your school or MAT at the moment. We'll make sure we are the right fit. For most schools, we are, and most MATs we are. But hey, sometimes it's not the right time for people, or they've got so much other things going on. We say to them, look, if you can't devote the time after you've run the first bit, perhaps you might want to wait 6 months. So we want to help schools that want to help themselves. So whilst this isn't a done for you service, it's we make this as easy to do it for yourself.
Yeah, I found a great phrase the other day from an EdTech client who said to me, "We're not PC world where you go and get the computer and you've got to get on with it yourself." A lot of companies, or a lot of good suppliers in education, should not only give you the product but help you, show you how to use it longer term. And I guess a good way to finish, Mark, is Welbee does that for schools. And
we do, and you get 12 months remote support thrown in. So whilst we don't expect you to jump on a video call with every week saying what next, we hope you'll do it. Clearly, I mean, our renewal rate's over 90%, and I think that says a lot. And often people don't renew, it's because they're waiting a bit, or COVID came.
Mark, can I put you on the spot and ask you for a concluding word of wisdom in the current climate of energy price rises, the mini budget, cost of living, things happening in Ukraine, and all sorts of the pressures that all teachers and school leaders in particular face running our schools here in England? Any words of wisdom? Put you on the spot.
I'll do my best. Well, I think the key thing is there is a lot going on, but we have to focus on what we can control, not what we can't control, and we have to do the opposite to what most people naturally do in times of recession and crisis, which is to focus in on those things and spend on those things that are going to have the biggest impact long term. And that, for me, is your staff, your employees across, whether that's your MAT, your school, and effectively making sure more of them, if not all of them, stay with you through this difficult time. And that's kind of our mission, is how do we help more people, put more money back in their budget whilst delivering improved pupil outcomes and student outcomes, all through putting their staff first and really becoming an employer of choice and a place where people really want to work and skip into work with a smile on their face every day. So a very fitting way to end. I won't add any other words of wisdom. I think people have heard enough from me in other places. So I'm going to leave things there tonight. Everyone that's watched live, thank you. People watching this recorded, circulated with all the links and the offers. Take a look. You've got nothing to lose. Mark, thank you for your time. Thank you for your work. No, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Amit. And special thank you to everybody who, after a hard day in schools, taking some time out tonight to watch us. And I hope we've shared something that has some value and some interest for you. And whether it's to have a look at it, or if you've just got any questions on people strategy, on well-being, I'm really happy to just fire them in, and I'll come back to you individually and answer any questions you've got.
So there you go. A fitting way to end. I'll leave that up on there. Mark, thanks very much. I'll speak to you soon. Thank you, everyone. Bye for now.
Take care.
Bye-bye.